Welcome, welcome, welcome. O.J. Simpson is dead. Oh, wait, that's a different podcast that I do. Welcome to the 2024 Boston Marathon preview show. We have boots on the ground in Boston. Jonathan Galt and Weldon Johnson have just concluded the annual pre-race press conference. They have all of the inside scoop. They'll be sharing it with you. Ken Evans, Chebet, three-peat. Ken Hellen Obiri, repeat. We haven't had a repeat winner in Boston in something like 15 years. That would be special if it happens. We'll also talk about some other things. Vast majority Boston. But Parker Valby has made her 10,000 meter debut. Simeon Birnbaum is hurt. And of course, O.J. Simpson is dead. A few comments on that at the end of the show. But this is a special live edition of the Friday 15. Normally this podcast is just for our Supporters Club members, but a special events we go live from the source. Guys, what have you learned at the Fairmont Copley this morning?
I learned why Cisse Lemma, who is a 201 guy, second fastest in Ethiopian history, fourth fastest in the history of the world, why he's running Boston, a race where he's never finished higher than 30th, instead of London this spring. So I thought that was interesting. Talked to CJ Albertson about his ideal splits for Boston. He listed them all out, and that's how he's pretty realistic. That's not how it's going to go. But I thought it was interesting. He mapped out what basically a perfect day would be. And what else did I learn? I guess I talked to Emma Bates and Jenny Simpson, and they were very, very nice as usual. Weldon, what about you?
Talked to Sarah Hall. She almost made me cry. Olympic trials is still very real. Theodore Talby said he's in much better shape than last year when he was fifth. Said, does that mean you can win this thing? He's like, you got to dream, man. And Elkanah Chebet, fourth placer at the Olympic trials. It's some interesting stuff. He said he's way fitter for Boston than the trials. He said he wasn't even in that good a shape for the trials. But I think there's stuff that everybody can learn from his talk about not overdoing it in training. But we can go there in a minute.
Well, and the other thing is Robert's saying like, oh, it's going to be Boston. I mean, Robert, do you think our listeners are more interested in hearing about Boston Marathon Media Day, or do they want to freak the hell out about Parker Valby? I feel like Parker Valby is one of the most popular runners on Let's Run. She just broke the collegiate record by 27 seconds and ran 30:50 solo in her 10K debut. I feel like a lot of people would want to hear about that. I don't think it's crazy to open the show with that, but if you want to start with Boston, we start with Boston.
Well, in the comments, Cam PRM on YouTube is saying, just rename the show right now. It's Valby Mania, baby. Parker Valby, so hot right now. When Valby wins gold at the Olympics, will her celebrity eclipse that of Jakob Ingebrigtsen? Those are actually three different comments. So if you want to talk about Miss Valby's disappointing run to start, we can do that, I guess. I went to bed last night. I'm in charge of the homepage on Wednesdays and Thursday night. We didn't even talk about anyone was going to be staying up till 12:30. Normally I'm the night owl, but I was like, I got to get up early. And dropped my son off at school. I kind of forgot about the race. And then I went to Let's Run. Somebody had written a nice detailed recap of the race. And I'm assuming that was you, Jonathan Gold.
It wasn't a detailed recap. I didn't stay up for it. I just woke up. I watched the last 100 meters. But yeah, I did recap it because it's kind of mind blowing to me. Like in the last 5 months, we've seen the first collegiate woman break 31 minutes in the 10K, the first collegiate man break 27 minutes in the 10K, the first collegiate man break 13 minutes in the 5K, and the first collegiate woman break 15 minutes in the 5K. We talk about all the shoes and everything and like, oh, it helps. But like Nico Young and Parker Valby, these are two ridiculous seasons they're putting together. And 30-50, I guess Robert's not impressed, but she is the youngest American at age 21 to break 31 minutes. And the interesting thing, I thought she was only a tenth of a second off of Dina Castor's time of 30-50, which was the American record from 2002 to 2008. She said it in May of 2002. Parker Valby was born in September of 2002. So I thought that was kind of an interesting connection.
I said disappointing, in a somewhat clickbaity way, but immediately when I saw the time, I started reading the article and thought, what did she go out in? And It's just disappointing because I'm a big fan of Valby. It's hard to make the team in the 5,000. There aren't that many. There's only 2 Americans with the standard in the 10,000, plus Katie Izzo, who's got the standard via cross country. And I'm assuming if Valby was racing Izzo, Valby would destroy her, and then she would be on the Olympic team if she'd run 10 seconds faster. So that aspect of it is disappointing. Like, there aren't that many chances to run a good 10,000 meters. And I'm like, man, if they had just run her in a different meet, this is 30-50 solo, lapping everybody in the field. I'm assuming there was no pacing lights. Is that correct, John?
I don't know, Robert, and I couldn't find a 5K split for her. I wanted to. The splits went on the website. You have it, Weldon? What'd she go out in?
Yeah, that's the big question for me. What were they thinking? She went out in 15:30. So she goes 15:30, 15:10, but
15:30, 15:20.
oh, 15:20. But you think she's gonna go 15:30, 15:10? That's a very big ask. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's not as crazy as thinking, because I was like, that's a hard way to do it, but maybe that's how she runs. But
Well,
a little more aggressive at the beginning. Could she get it? Obviously, with Pacers, could she get it? I mean,
Here's the comparison that's worth making. Remember the British Parker Valby, Megan Keith, who's track PB 14:56 from last summer. They're the same age. And Megan Keith went to the 10, was in that race, ran 30:36, got the Olympic standard. That was kind of a wacky one because it's not like they were exactly on standard pace, but she did have people to run with. Parker Valby did not. And they did have lights going towards the Olympic standard. So I'm fascinated to know, did Will Palmer, the Florida coach, and Parker Valby, did they consider doing what Nico Young did and said, oh, we're going to go turn around for NCAAs and run the 10 next weekend? Or was that never on the table?
there's stuff we definitely need to find out more about this one. But hey, all in
Well,
all,
look-
if you think about it,
I thought it was a great run. I'm not saying like 30-50
No.
solo in a 10K debut. It's a great performance. I'm not disappointed, but
What do you mean?
It is
No,
fair
it's
to wonder. It's fair to wonder, Robert, if you put her in perfect conditions, you get, a pacemaker. Does she run faster, or is it just Parker Valby's already shown she can run really fast without paces?
she runs faster. Look, it's just disappointing to come that close. And it's also disappointing to be a track and field fan. Jakob Larson, World Athletics, are you listening? It's absolutely just, I know they have to have standards and it has to be disappointing. And it only really affects the nerds like us. It's not going to affect the grand scheme of the popularity of the sport. But the fact of the matter, the idea that she can't go to the Olympics because she didn't run 10 seconds faster, yet Katie Izzo can go to the Olympics, is infuriating to me. It's just so stupid. They need to have the quota relocation points. The spots go to the country. If there's a trials race in your top 2, you deserve to go. But look, I was thinking, 15:30. I was thinking the same thing. Oh, she's got to go 15:10. No, she would have to go 15:10. She only ran 15:20. I was talking to John Kellogg. He's like, that's not big enough of a pickup that I think that if she'd gone out a little bit faster, I was saying she needs to get at least 15:25. She's going to try to get it to do it. I don't think if she goes out a little bit faster, she gets it on her own. Now, what do we learn from breaking 2 and all these things? Running behind people helps. Even if it's perfect conditions out in California with no wind, there's still a slipstream effect, pacing lights. I'm assuming that's worth, 10 seconds. But Valby, do we know that Valby can run in a pack? I mean, this is a woman that couldn't even run on tangents on a cross-country course as of like a year ago. So she's used to running alone, doing things solo. Maybe she wouldn't feel comfortable in a pack. That's crazy to think. But I'm assuming like physics don't lie. And
She ran a pack in the free K at NCAA indoors. I think she'd be able to grasp the concept.
Yeah. So I think if you put her in the race at the 10 with Keith and them, she would have the standard and would probably be going to the Olympics. But an amazing run. She breaks the record by 27 seconds. All right, let's move to Boston. And, we're talking about slipstream effects and whatever. One of the things from last year's race that was big for me was I could not believe how stupid Eliud Kipchoge was. Like he's the greatest runner of all time. People were marathoner of all time. People were coordinating him with the win before it even happened. Runner's World had published a special edition that came out the day of the race and basically jinxed him and he doesn't win the race. But I've always said, what was the CV on his hole? He's never run a non-flat race. Can he do it? But what shocked me about the race was he decided to lead the whole thing into a headwind. There was a significant headwind last year. And I think a big story this year is, well, one, Kipchoge is not there, but two, the weather. This to me looks like one of the most glorious weather days in the history of the Boston Marathon. Like the forecast, I've been updating it every day for like a week. We've been doing it for like 11 days out, but everything's narrowing down. And in terms of what's good for the runners and what's good for the spectators, I'm not sure you can get a better race than the weather forecast that we're having for Monday. Right now, it's looking like 53 at the start, 57 or 58 at the finish for the pros, low 60s for the amateurs, sunny skies at the start, some sun and clouds for most of the race. So it's going to be like, and then the wind is going to be coming out of the northwest. So that's a little bit of a crosswind, but it's going to help them a little bit, like maybe like 30 seconds. So I just think that you couldn't have a better combination of what's good for the runners and what's good for the fans. Yeah, ideally for the runners, it'd be about 5 or 6 degrees cooler. I would say like 48 to 52, would be ideal for the runners, but that's a little chilly for the fans. The sun is perfect. This is going to be an amazing day. There's a thread up on Let's Run. If you're running Boston, you've got no excuses. So we don't have to worry about the headwind. We don't have to worry about someone doing something stupid. It's just going to be perfect weather on Monday. So I think the conditions are ripe. If somebody wants to try to run fast, they could do it. But again, it's like hard to lead a race. It's kind of foolish to lead a race. So we'll see what happens. Historically, people aren't going for the fast times. But let's start with the men. And, Evan Chebet is going for the three-peat. You've talked to the coach, John, beforehand for your preview article, which is now up on the website. And he was saying, he missed the New York because of an Achilles injury. That's still been bothering him. Sometimes they were worried he wouldn't run this race. So it sounds like he's not 100%. Did anyone actually speak to him today himself? How did he appear, like confidence-wise? What was the vibe you were getting from Mr. Chebet himself today?
It's very hard to get a vibe from him. He has very limited English, and they didn't have a translator. It was hard to get a vibe from him, Robert, because his English is very limited, and I didn't see a translator on hand. So I asked him a few times about the Achilles, and he didn't. He just said, "Oh yeah, I trained for the race." It was kind of hard to get any actual insight. But I did talk to his coach earlier in the week, and they just admitted that they didn't get to do everything they wanted to do. They had to alter some workouts, but he also said, look, he's not a workout hero anyway. Claudio Berardelli, who's his coach, he also coaches Benson Kipruto, who just ran 2:02 in Tokyo. He coaches a number of other top athletes, Sebastian Salway, the World Half Marathon champion. And his point was essentially, he's never leading these reps. He's never finishing in the front in workouts, but he always puts it together in the race. He's a great marathoner. He knows how to win, and he's run almost 20 marathons in his career. So I think essentially, like, if he's going to win on Boston, yeah, he's going to be fit. Maybe he's not as fit as the last couple of years, but he's going to have to rely on sort of his experience and his savviness if he's to win. So that to me makes him a little vulnerable. Whereas the last couple of years, he runs 2:05, and then he had the year before, he was just ripping off 4:20s coming down Beacon Street. Like, those performances, I'm like, no one's touching him. He's so fast. This one, I don't see him ripping off another streak like that. If he wins, it's going to be, he's going to have to use his brain as well, I think.
So he's the Clayton Young of the training group now. He never wins the workouts. He lets Connor Mance win the workouts. Then he just beats the boys in the races. Very interesting. So, it'll be interesting because did the coach give any indication if he wins this race, does he think that they're going to get on the Olympic team? Because to me, it would be foolish. If a guy's won Boston and New York and Boston in his last 3 marathons, he's got to be on the Olympic team.
The coach wasn't certain. He was like, look, it's, I can't tell you for sure. He wasn't named to the first team, so you can't say, like, he's like, I don't know. We're just going to do our best and we'll see what happens. Evans himself, I did ask him that, and this was actually where he got the most animated, because I asked him, like, what was your reaction to not being named to the initial team or to the 5-man team? And he was just like, well, I was injured at the time, so that's probably why they didn't name me. And I said, you know, if you win, do you think they'll pick you to the team? He's like, I think they will. So I think I'm with you, Robert. I think Athletics Kenya would be idiotic not to pick him to the team. And I'm taught to some people behind the scenes, they're sort of saying like, well, you got to factor in the shoe stuff with this. Like he's an Adidas contract and Athletics Kenya, that's sponsored by Nike. So, that whole thing's happening. And I'm like, okay, I'm not saying that that's not a factor, but I'm also, they named Benson Kipruto, who's an Adidas athlete. He was on the 5-man list. I don't think they're not going to pick any Adidas athletes. And I think it's a travesty if Evans Chebet wins and they leave him off. But that is something that people have been talking about.
I think that's conspiracy theory. Until something like that happens, I just was like, where's somebody going with this? But somebody did say that to us.
Hey,
But
I had never thought of. I was talking to a good friend of mine, Artie Smith, former Cornell women's coach, yesterday. He's like, I don't believe everything is a conspiracy theory in life. I think that's good thing to operate by. Most of the time, it's not a conspiracy theory, but I'd never thought about that before. Thank God America does not, I was reading about the Australian championships, which are going right now. And someone's like, it's great that there's, subjectivity in our selection process. And I was like, no, it's not. No, it's not. I just like to let the results speak for themselves, because can you imagine in America? I never thought about that. They might be trying to favor Nike athletes, or people would think they were favoring Nike athletes, which would be a joke. A few updates. One, in the comments about Parker Valby, someone says she was paced for 5,000 meters. So amazing run, breaks the record by 25 seconds. It's just disappointing to get that close to the Olympics standard and not get it. And it's also just disappointing that it just reminds me of like the whole standards and all this thing is kind of infuriating. Other big news breaking news right here. Play the sound effects. I'm not sure which button to push, if that would be the sound effects, but my favorite triple jumper on planet Earth. Can't believe this. Yomar Rojas, Mrs. Rojo. There's Rojo, that's me. She's Rojas, has had Achilles surgery, is out of the Olympics. So that's a bummer because she's got good charisma, amazing athlete. But okay. The other question I wanted you guys to get to the bottom of here at this press conference, because when I fly up for it, I'm always like running around trying to like think, okay, what do I not know from having talked to the coach or read, the stats? And it's just certain inside baseball type things. And I wanted to know why Cisse Lema, who is the winner of Valencia, 201.48, in December, so you can't get any better form than that. But he's run Boston 3 or 4 times, right, John? And his best finish is horrendous. What is it?
So he's run 3 times. He's dropped out twice, and the one time he did finish, he was 30th in 2019, right? 222. So that's only 2 seconds faster than Emma Bates ran last year, for perspective. And this struck me too, Robert. I'm like, why wouldn't he go to London? He's won London in the past. So I talked to his coach, Kamedu Dedefo, and I said, what's he doing here? And the first thing he said was, well, Valencia was the shape of his life, and he was actually kind of disappointed because he missed out on Bekele's Ethiopian record by 7 seconds. So he was like, yeah, we were kind of bummed. We wanted to break that. But I said, why is Cisse Lema running Boston? He's had better success in these flat courses. And he said, well, first of all, when he was running Boston before, his explanation, he's like, something always went wrong. He was either sick or he had a little injury in the buildup. He said, even if you have a little injury in the buildup, it can become magnified when you're actually running a race and the course is difficult as Boston. That was his explanation. But anyway, so that's why he said Boston had gone wrong in the past. He thinks he can still run well on the course. As for why he's doing it this year, though, he said he also coaches Tamarat Tola, the guy who just broke the New York City Marathon course record last fall. And Dedefo just said, look, we wanted to win both races. We wanted to have, in an ideal world, Lema wins Boston and Tola wins London next week. And the other thing he said was that's the best way they both can make the Olympic team. If you send them both to Boston or both to London, let's say they both go to London and they go 1-2. Okay, the winner's probably on the team, but the second placer, the federation might look, and especially if the time's a little slower, the federation might look at it and say, okay, well, he got beat by another Ethiopian in London. Why would we pick him? So he's like, look, if we separate them, either they both win, or even if Lema finishes second, he's the top Ethiopian, that plus his 201 in Valencia might be enough to pick him on the team. So there's some strategy here in terms of giving both guys a chance to win a spring marathon and also getting them both on the Olympic team this summer.
Long story short, John, he's the Bobby Kersey of Ethiopian distance coaches.
Well, I was going to say that. I was going to say this is a friendly reminder, folks. If you're thinking about being a professional runner, this reminds me that I've always said this. Most of the time, the agent is supposed to be looking at what's best for you. Same thing with the coach. And a lot of times they're not doing that. They're like looking at it, what's best for the group. Like, oh, I won't maximize this one athlete, but I won't piss Nike off. And then my next athletes will get better. So in the long term, it helps the agent a lot. It helps the coach, but is there any indication this person's good at hilly races? I mean, I have no indication that Kipchoge is. Do we have any indication that Limit can handle a course like this?
No. He's run a lot of these marathons, and I can't tell you about the Warsaw Marathon or the Tiberias Marathon, which he ran back in 2013. But all the ones I recognize that he's run well on, they're all flat. But there isn't evidence to support it. But Defo is a pretty great coach. He's coached athletes to success on both hilly and flat courses. He seems to think he's okay, but maybe that's just him believing his athlete. But I'll push back on this thing. Robert, you're saying, oh, it's in the coach's interest or the agent's interest. Well, isn't it also like the strategy he outlined? That's a way for both of them to get on the Olympic team. If he's going to Boston and Tola is going to London, it means he doesn't have to race Tola in Boston. So that's arguably those are the top two Ethiopian marathoners right now. And not racing each other might actually boost each of their chances because there's one Ethiopian stud they don't have to worry about in their own race.
As long as they both were fine with it, I'm fine with it too. But I'm not saying it's necessarily bad. Like if I was on a training group, I wouldn't want to try to crush my teammate, and I would like a scenario like this. But if I wasn't suited for the course, if I'm Sarah Hall and have shown consistently that I'm not going to run well in a hilly course, I wouldn't want to be running, about the Boston Marathon. All right, other contenders here: Gabriel Gay of Tanzania, 2:03 flat PB, 4th and 2nd the last 2 years. Cyprian Kotat of Kenya, 2:04 in Amsterdam last year. I mean, there's Haftu Tekteklu of Ethiopia, Shashira Kitata. All those guys are under 2:05 in terms of PBs. I mean, I guess Suguro Osako is the Japanese, Olympian. I can't see him contending for the win here. Do you have any of these names, John, that jump out at you?
None of them really. I mean, John Courier is kind of interesting. He was 3rd and 4th in Chicago the last couple of years. He was only 9th last year, but he's coached. Do you know who coaches John Courier? Ron Mann. I only learned this recently. I didn't even realize Ron Mann was still coaching, but he coaches John Courier, and he's also the younger brother of Wesley Courier, who was the 2012 Boston Marathon champion. And he just ran 58:50, I think, in a half marathon a few weeks ago. So he's coming in pretty good shape. That's kind of, I don't know if you call him a Buzzwise a long shot, but he's a guy I've got my eye on.
And Rod Mann back in the day coached.
Didn't he coach Wesley? Like, I assume that's the connection.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's before I was covering the sport.
He did. And if y'all don't know who Ron Mann is, he was the longtime Northern Arizona coach before going to Louisville. So back when Let's was founded in 2000, he was the NAU coach, and it was like NAU was like the upstart program. Like if they got like top 20, we were pretty excited about it. If you're looking for the first let's talk about the Americans and the first non-European. Did anyone talk to Sondre Moen of Norway?
I didn't even think he was here. Did you see him, Walden?
I saw a placard for him, but
anyways,
one more thing on Ron Mann. Ron Mann coached Ibrahim Hussein. I think was the first Kenyan Boston winner of Boston way back in 1992. So he has 2 Boston winners. Now he's got John Courier. John, how long has he coached him for?
I don't know. I don't know.
If it's a new relationship, that could be my Budweiser long shot. But
it's kind of interesting, like this race in terms of, it's got a couple of the greatest non-African runners ever, and Suguro Osako, Sondre Moen of Norway is who I was talking about. Ran 2:05 back in 2000.
You're calling them 2 of the greatest non-African runners ever, like by what?
In the marathon, in terms of personal. Excuse me. I shouldn't say greatest. How about fastest?
Yeah,
Moen ran 2:05.48 in 2017 to win Fukuoka, and then did run 2:07.16 in Fukuoka in December. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do. And normally you think, an Olympic year with the trials, it's not great for the Americans, but with the super shoes, I think that the runners can bounce back, much quicker than they did back in the day. And CJ Albertson has proven repeatedly that he can run, 3 marathons in like 5 weeks. So I assume, and he's great on the downhills. Like, I'm assuming CJ Albertson's, he's my pick. Well, no, take that back, actually. So we've got CJ Albertson, who was 5th at the trials, Alcana Chebet, who was 4th at the trials, Matt McDonald, who was only 64th at trials. But hey, I'm wearing my Princeton sweatshirt right now, so he's a Princeton alum. And then Sam Chalanga. Those are kind of the top Americans. Given Albertson's pedigree in Boston, his desire to break 210 for the first time, I was thinking, okay, he's going to be my top American. But Weldon hinted at it at the top of the show, or maybe it was on the speakerphone before we started. Apparently, Alcana Chebet is in amazing shape. Can you guys, what are y'all feeling American-wise here?
Well, I might pump brakes a little bit on CJ because I talked to him and he just said, his feet had kind of been bothering him and feeling sore after the trials. And he's a coach and PE teacher at Clovis Community College out in California. So he's like, yeah, it's spring track season. I've been going to all these meets and it's just a lot of time on the weekend on feet. It's not totally ideal for preparing to run the Boston Marathon while you're coming off of kind of being banged up from the Olympic trials. So he's like, look, I know how to run this course and I still think I can run pretty well, but we've talked to him before and he's come in thinking like I'm in 206 shape or something like that. And he was very much not. He was like, look, I'll run. I think I can run pretty well, but he wasn't saying like, this is the best shape I've ever been in. So whereas it sounds like Chebet thinks he is in great shape.
He talked a big game. First of all, he's now 40. He talked about wanting to break Bekele's Masters world record, which is 204. Not here, but like down the road maybe. And
American record too.
This would be an American record. And I'm just like, dude, like, what's his PB, John? I think he ran a 209.
He's run 209.07 in Boston.
Yeah, here. But we're talking like he ran that 211, sort of kind of get on the scenes of Chicago a few years ago. He's like, dude, that was pre-super shoes. They make a big difference. And I was like, well, what about your fitness here compared to the trials where he was the 4th place finisher and where I thought he was making a team, but 25 miles when we ran to go actually watch the end of the race, I was like, the team is determined. He slipped back to 4th because the winning career's great performance, but he's like, the goal here is top 5. Actually, would that open up the Olympic spot automatically for a career or not?
Yeah. How are we this late into the process? We're like 1 month until we're finally over with this ridiculous process of qualifying for the Olympic marathon, and you still don't know if top 5 in a major is the standard. It does. It will unlock the final spot.
I knew it did beforehand, but I thought there was some rule you couldn't chase after the top 5 or something, and he wasn't sure. So he's like, I want to open up a spot for him.
No, USATF has been pretty muddled with their communication about this. But look, if Chebet opens up a spot for Korea, USATF isn't going to not take it because it came after the trials. It'll work in Korea's favor.
And essentially, I just thought he had a lot of insight. I'll go, how was the fitness for the trials? And he's like, I wasn't that fit. Like, I'm fitter now. And I'm like, what? You got 4th at the Olympic trials? And he's like, I think it's because of the recovery. Heron Lagat coaches him, and he was saying like, one, this guy's a full-time job in the Army, so that's different. But he's sort of remarking, I think he has a lot of experience, but he's like, I tell Heron I'm tired, and he's like, we push off the workouts. He's like, when I was younger, we would just do more, and he started talking about stuff. He's like, he's reading like Betsy Sena's workouts before the trials, Kiera D'Amato's, and he's like, oh my gosh, these are crazy workouts. And he's like, wait, when are you guys doing these? And then they weren't there on the day of the trials. And his point was, he's like, I think a lot of athletes are doing too much. It sounds like he thinks there's still a lot more to come from him, and then with shoes and stuff. And I think the talk of 204 is crazy, but if you don't believe it first, it'll never happen.
I'm going to tell you now, he's not running 204 at the age of 40. It's not happening. It is crazy. I like Alcana Chebet, and I think he's a great runner. And I wouldn't be surprised if he can run a personal best. But 204 is, I think that's crazy talk.
Yeah, it seemed pretty crazy. But I think the bigger picture is he's like, I wasn't in the best fitness for the Olympic trials and I got 4th. And then I talked to, Matt McDonald, and I was like, how's the Boston training going? And he's like, I'm not as fit as for the trials. I was so fit for the trials. I was like banging out these workouts. It was just unbelievable. I was doing 20 milers at race pace. He's like, I'm not usually the type of guy who can do that. Well, and I was like, we have Matt finished, and he's like, I don't even know, like 60 something place. I have to go look it up. And he's like, look, he didn't say he did too much, but Elkanah would probably argue, like, look, he probably left it all out in training. So I just think there's a word of caution for all these people, and Sarah Hall. Well, we'll get to the women in a minute, but sort of everybody bouncing back from the trials. It's like it'll be interesting to see how they do because you only had what 2 months?
Yeah, 10 weeks. Yep.
10 weeks. So you're gonna have a couple down periods. There's gonna be an emotional down period. So, but everyone sort of also said like, look, with the exception of Elkanah, who got fourth at trials, I was very fit for the trials. So I'm hoping some of that carries over.
Look, if you're enjoying the show, get it as a podcast. Join the supporters club today. Let'sRun.com/subscribe. You get a free t-shirt. Look how good that t-shirt looks, people. You can also buy that t-shirt, the regular Let's Run t-shirt, shop.letsrun.com. All right, let's turn to the women. A record for Boston, 9 women sub 220 in this race. The most in history is 10 from London last year. London this year also will have 9. There's been a little bit. One of the races, I think it was supposed to have 11. There's been a couple pullouts, but led by Hellen Obiri. And she's not one of those 9 women. I mean, her marathon PB is over 220, but she's won Boston and New York last year. She was fantastic track career. And, the comes into this race. I mean, John, you talked to Dathan Ritzenheim, for your preview article, and the quote that jumped out at me, I mean, it was, we feel pretty confident that her fitness is the best it's been for a marathon. So she's my heavy favorite, because if you look at these other women, like the 2 fastest women in the field from Ethiopia, Tadu, I mean, if I've never heard of you, like, I don't really care what your marathon PB is. Tashome of Ethiopia and Hiwat Gebremariam of Ethiopia, both 217 in Valencia, one in 22, one in 2023. But like, Tashome was only 5th in Chicago last year. Gebremariam was only 8th in Boston last year. Like, I want to see it's not necessarily, if you're running, like, to me, a 218 or a 219 without a win is not really significant to me in the year 2024. That doesn't indicate that you're going to win a major. Like, to be honest, in a stacked major, it's probably going to go to somebody who can run an all-out race, 215, 216. I mean, when the world record is 211, think of it that way. So, Obiri, John, did she seem just totally confident today?
Well, you talked to her.
No, I just sort of realized maybe that's one that slipped through the cracks because they brought her up on the podium. She's like, I'm a marathoner now. I mean, she's won her Boston and New York. Like, you can't do any better than that. And then I was waiting, and actually for the 1-on-1, actually we missed the defending champion. Oops. But yeah, I agree 100%. She has to be everybody's favorite for this race. I mean, it'd be interesting. Well, maybe, who knows? Actually, DraftKings or something like that. It'd be interesting to see, because last year was the whole thing here, right? There weren't the betting odds.
Oh, yeah.
They were going to be listed, and
Should
they
I
were
pull up my
pulled.
phone, see if it's
So-
on DraftKings?
It would be interesting to see betting odds on this race. I mean, this race is on ESPN or ESPN2. Everything on that should have betting. But one, it also helps fans sort of like gauge how much of a favorite she really is. And when I look at the women's race in general, this is where I really see the effect of the shoes. Just because it used to be like you would just sort of scroll through at the sub 220s and be like, oh, one of these women's going to win the race. And now, I mean, I see 9 women under 220. It's just like such a different ballgame.
Which it doesn't
crazy.
really mean much anymore. The sub 220, like, for an American, it's still a big deal. But in, like, globally, when I first started covering this sport in 2014, 2015, I don't know if there were 9 women walking the planet who had broken 220. Like, and now you've got 2 spring marathons who have 9 women in them who've broken 220 each. Like, we're saying, oh, it's the deepest Boston ever. Well, yeah, it's just because there are more 218 and 217, 219 women than there were, and that number is growing every year because of the shoes. So I look at it, and I'm with you, Robert. Like Taidu Shome, she's the top seed, but she ran 3 marathons last year and didn't finish higher than 5th in any of them. I'm looking at what people have done lately. Are they winning races?
But what does top seed mean? It was like me saying that Shigeru Osaka is one of the greatest non-African runners ever. No, he's one of the fastest. She's the fastest seed. Like if you were doing, we could actually look at their marathon rankings, or if you actually had a really good computerized ranking, she would not be one of the very top people. To me, and I would love to see betting odds. Like Obiri to me wins this race probably. I mean, we used to say no one's consistent, but nowadays the training's pretty dialed in. The shoes. You're seeing a lot of people, like it's not just Kipchoge that's winning races all the time. Evans Chebet, generally when he starts, is winning nowadays. I think Obiri's going to be in that win. I would think she might win this race 3 out of 4 times. But on the article, 87% of the people are picking her to win on Let'sRun.com. So I don't think I would bet her if the betting odds. We have to see what the betting odds would be. But in terms of other people who could take Obiri down. And I definitely think she could lose this race because, like her strategy seemed to be in Boston and New York was just wait till late and then see what happens. And, you think you're feeling good, but other people could be feeling good too. But, Meseret Belete of Ethiopia, like 2:18:21 PB. But then what jumps out at me, 1 Doha, 1 Amsterdam last year. So she's a winner, though.
Yeah, but I mean, Robert, on first glance, she's sort of appealing to me too, because I see that and I'm thinking like, okay, 218 wins. But like, it's not like Doha is like the World Championships or something. So, if I go back a year before that, she was, I guess she ran slower, but 13th at the Berlin Marathon. Granted, she ran 223, but there is something to be said about winning races versus running 217 and getting 6 in a race. If you run 217 and get 6 in a race, I guess I know your engine's there, but like one person who's not on the sub 220 list is Hellen Obiri. So, because she's run Boston, she's won in New York. Obviously, you could take Hellen Obiri. I mean, Nathan Rizzo said she was in 211 shape last year. So,
and he said her benchmark workouts for this build-up were better than what she did for Boston and New York last year. So she's super fit. But Robert, I think the way she gets beat is similar to what we had last year. It comes down to a pack of 3 or 4 in the final mile, and just one of them kind of outruns them. That's the thing about Boston and New York is it's not that common for someone to just go out super hard, but there are no pacemakers. So you don't have people just breaking away midway through and then really holding it. Usually the lead pack stays together longer. So the people I look at who could beat her, maybe Sharon Lekady, who won New York City a couple of years ago and was with the lead pack in New York last fall. She was with Obiri until the final miles. Ababel Yeshina, who was 4 seconds away from winning this race in 2022. She got beat by Perez Jepchirchir, who was unstoppable, the best marathoner on earth at that point. Last year, she was with the leaders until the final miles, wound up 4th place. Those are the 2 women who stand out. And then maybe Semberi Teferi, who's run 14:15 on the track. She just ran 64:40 the Barcelona half. Like, she has, she could just hang around maybe and be dangerous at the end. But I do think Obiri is an overwhelming favorite. I'm not sure if it'll go up to 3 out of 4 times, but maybe 2 out of 3 times. Because my thing is, I'm also looking like Tokyo going in. I was just like, oh, Sifan Hassan, all right. She's finally had a chance to do a full legit build-up for a marathon. She was really, really good last year, won London and Chicago. She rolls up to Tokyo. She only finishes 4th. Now, I can't tell you, I don't know if her build-up was amazing the way Obiri's has been, but even the best can still get beaten. But I have to think Obiri, if I was setting odds, which I could not find on DraftKings, by the way, I don't see Boston Marathon odds, I'd have her probably winning 2 out of 3 times.
It's interesting that a lot of the names you mentioned were people who have not broken 220 in their career. I mean, Lekady won New York, but has not broken 220. Yeshina, who was, 2nd and 4th the last 2 years, is a 220:51 PB. But, she's run 65:44 at RA half, so we know she's in shape. And then Teferi, former great track runner, only a 219 PB, which isn't great. Hasn't been amazing at the marathon, but sometimes You do see those breakthroughs after a number of marathons. Like you wouldn't think, when your 9th marathon, you have the breakthrough. But remember Hendrik Ramala? I mean, I think it was like his 15th marathon when he finally won New York. So I do actually think that the concept of Boston sometimes becomes more of a track race. She hangs in there and just kicks everybody. She's not going to need to run 2:15 in this race. So she just needs to have good enough. It's kind of like Jakob Ingebrigtsen in the 5,000. His endurance just needs to be good enough so nobody outkicks him. They can outkick them. Well, maybe, Teferi just needs to be good enough. She doesn't need to be able to run 2:12 in a non-rapid race. She just needs to be able to not be dropped. And then the problem is she's rolling the dice against Obiri, who's a better track runner than she was. Maybe not as fast, but better, in terms of credentials and whatnot like that. All right, American women. We have Jenny Simpson hoping to finish her first marathon. She debuted at the trials and dropped out. Carolyn Rotich, who actually won this race for Kenya in 2015, is now an American. She was 6th at the Olympic trials. Des Linden, I think, is kind of more here to pick up an appearance fee. Not really contend for the win, but former winner. And then I'm most interested in Emma Bates. I mean, last year she said, I think I'm in American record shape. She ran in the lead for most of the race, ended up finishing 5th, had to miss the trials with an injury after getting hurt in the Chicago Marathon. So I assume she's super motivated. What was her mindset today? What did she say about the buildup? How is she feeling?
Yeah, I talked to her about this. She said for about 12 weeks coming off Chicago, she was cross training and really trying to rush to get ready for the trials. Because remember, she stepped in a pothole and tore her plantar fascia in Chicago last fall. Awful timing, obviously, with the trials on the horizon. For a long time, she's like, look, it wasn't a smooth build up at the start. I was not enjoying cross training because it was the first major injury of her career. And she was getting frustrated because she wasn't seeing a lot of progress. They were trying to be patient, just say, sort of let the fitness come to you, don't force it. But she wasn't seeing any results. And then about a month or two, month and a half ago, maybe, things just kind of clicked. And she started seeing results in training. She actually said some of her most recent workouts have been even better than they were going into Boston last year. So that's got her feeling confident. So I do think there's something to be said for having sort of a long, smooth, uninterrupted buildup. Like you might be able to rip a couple faster workouts, but that body of work still matters. But she's in a very positive headspace. She said, look, the trials, I watched it and I tried not to think about the fact that I wasn't there. She just wanted to she's like, I was very happy for the women who made the team. And she's like, yes, of course, I thought that could have been me. But she's like, the trials, I'm a fan of running. I'm a fan of the sport. I enjoyed watching the trials. I was happy for them. And she said the one thing she likes about the sport is, the Olympic trials, they're over, but okay, the Boston Marathon, that's still a big deal. There are other events you can get excited for, especially in the marathon. And she sees this as a big opportunity for her and she's ready to go after it.
And if she'd been at the trials, we might not have gotten one of the greatest stories. We probably would not have gotten one of the greatest stories because there was a huge gap between 2nd and 3rd. Dakota Lindworm would not be an Olympian. By the way, Taylor Dutch has written a profile of Dakota for Runner's World. If you haven't checked it out, you need to go to the homepage of Let's Run. We have the link there. It's one of the most inspiring profiles I've ever read. Just human interest. Like she was homeless in 8th grade, living in the car with her mother. And then her dad is divorced, decided to rent a house. He would live in the basement. Mom and daughter would live upstairs. It's just a great story about family, and her mother's now passed away with cancer and toughness. It's just, it's making me chills just thinking about it. So, all right. I think, are we going to lose Weldon's camera at 1 o'clock? So we're going to lose Weldon. So if so, I've got to get through.
2 o'clock. Right?
Well, no, they might kick us out of here at 1 p.m., but we're not 100% sure.
Okay.
So consider anything beyond 1 p.m. bonus content.
Okay. Well,
Robert, first of all, Runner's World was very happy that you promoted that article so much. Theo of Runner's World was like, thank you. It's a really good article. So
it's one of the best articles I've ever written or ever read about running. And I used to actually love this about Boston because back in the day, there was no internet. And in college, this is one of the few races that was live on American TV. So I would drive out from college to Connecticut. Weldon and I would go to the sports bar and watch the race from its entirety. And you didn't have live tracking. I always loved Boston because you could see the Americans in the background. Normally they'd be like 50, 100 meters back. And I felt like just knowing who the runners were and you could try to get their splits on your own watch was like fascinating. But it also could get, the newspapers, Dick Patrick of USA Today, or you could pick up the Boston Globe since Weldon was in New England, and you would learn about some Kenyan guy. Like, you didn't know their life story. And sometimes with some of these people, now it seems like we know everything about everybody, but I didn't know Dakota's story because she wasn't a star in college. She was like Division II walk-on. So it brought me back, 25 years ago when there was like a mystery about these runners and what their stories were. And it makes it more sort of like possible that a breakthrough is possible when I think the less you know, the more it seems like a mystery. When in reality, a lot of running just comes down to talent and hard work. But all right, let's make our predictions. The winner and top American on the polls in the preview right now. 87% are picking Obiri to win. Next highest is Meseret Beledi of Ethiopia, 5% for other. Top American, Emma Bates taking down 70%. Does anyone, those are my two picks. I guess the three of us are just going to say repeat.
Yeah, Obiri and Bates. Don't overthink it.
Sarah Hall I guess she doesn't run in the hills as well as Bates, right? But, talking to Sarah, you could tell the trial still stings. But, she got better for that one. She's been healthy for 18 months. She said she missed like 6 days in this lead up, which is not much for her. But, yeah, Bates sounds like she's in better shape. And last year she did so well. And that was one thing she said, because she used to live here, Robert. And then she was saying that obviously the Boston Marathon's a big deal, but until you're out there like leading the Boston Marathon, you just can't explain it. And that's one of the great things about Boston. Sure, we all expect Hellen Obiri to win, but I expect there's someone to be with her all the way through it's never like a runaway victory. There's always drama with the hills. What's going to happen at the end? Is somebody going to fall apart? What's the weather going to be like? There's a lot more variables than a pancake flash. If this was like a marathon project race in Arizona or something like that. So and then, Carolyn Rotich she was what, fifth at the trial? No, where'd she end up at the trial?
Sixth
Of the trials is somebody to watch. She's, she's almost 40. I say she's almost 40, but Sarah Hall is over 40. So there are other options besides Emma Bates here. And
it's just interesting. We don't know, as we saw with a number of athletes, talking about beer, we've been talking about this. It's better to undercook it by 10% than to overcook it by 1%. And, Betsy's saying that we were so high on her in the trials. She just didn't run well. And then goes to Tokyo a few weeks later and almost breaks the American record. I was actually talking to the old volunteer sprint coach at Cornell, Kevin Thompson, who does some charity work in Africa. He knows Betsy really well. And he was like, she's like, she was in amazing shape in Kenya. He's like, I think she was he thought she might be either a tiny bit sick at the trials, or he thought like she flew in too late and should have gotten there earlier. But it's just like the littlest thing. If you're off your game, you're not going to win a marathon major. Like, none of these women, even Obiri, are good enough to win, if they're sick, I don't think. So, should be fun. So, and again, reminder, let's turn to the men's race. If an American is in the top 5, that will lock up the 3rd spot for Leonard Career to go to the Olympics. Rotterdam is also this weekend, so he's going to try to get the 2:8:10 standard there himself. So a few hours before this, we'll know if he get it. If not, we can hope for a top 5 for American. And I'm reading Rufus Brevet on YouTube is saying that Rotterdam will retire. It's a bittersweet Rotterdam because Kelvin Kipton is dead and will not be going for sub 2. But he says Rotterdam will retire Kipton's bib number, and the finish line timer will display his name exactly at 1:59:59. So it is kind of sad. All right, men's race. Let's Run Nation on the polls are predicting. Let's see here. Evans Chebet was the favorite, but it was not nearly the overwhelming favorite as on the women's side. He's get 36% of the votes. Sissy Limit 28%, Gabriel Gay 26%. So it's basically a 3-horse race. Nobody else has higher than the next highest is 4% for other. And for top Americans, I don't agree with this. Oh, I did until I talked to you guys. CJ Albertson getting 76%. Elkanah Chebet and Sam Chalanga both getting 9%. I'm going with Elkanah Chebet. And God, I don't have a good feeling about this men's race because Chebet's not 100%, but he's a total gamer. Limay has shown no ability to run well in this course. Gay has shown ability to run well in this course. And is coming off a good race. God, I really hope Chebet wins, but I think I would bet, definitely if I was betting, I would bet on Gay because the odds would be better, much better than Chebet's. And I think his odds are similar to Chebet's to win this race.
Damn it, you stole my whole line of reasoning, Robert, because I was going to say the same thing. Coming in, I thought it was going to be CJ Albertson, top America, and after talking and hearing what Weldon had to say, I'm going to go with Elkanah Chebet. And I have the same doubts. I'm sorry, 2-1 in Valencia is impressive as hell. Boston's a totally different animal. And the fact that he's bombed Boston not once, not twice, but 3 times, that's very. I'm sorry, I can't pick you if that's your track record in Boston. So Lemma's out. Chebet, I don't like hearing about injuries during build-up, so I'm not picking him, though I do respect his, he's a warrior on the course. I think I'm going Gay. And the only thing I guess you might be worried about with Gabriel Gay is he ran the Valencia 10K. Remember the same one where the women ran super fast back in January, broke the world record? He only ran 28:20 in that race. I don't know if that's just, he was coming off, that's a month after he ran the Valencia Marathon, so maybe he just doesn't really care. But that's the only thing a little concerned about. But he's run 203 flat. He's finished 4th and 2nd in Boston the last 2 years. He's the guy I'm going to pick him for the win. But I also wouldn't be shocked if, Shira Katada has won a major marathon. John Courier, we just said, is coming off a fast half marathon.
Albert Courier.
Albert Courier, who's won New York and finished 3 times in the top 2 in New York. Yeah, I think there are a bunch of guys who have a decent shot to win it. I'm going to go Gay.
Yeah,
If you're on
I
your
talked to Albert Courier, actually. I was like, he's won New York, got set. No, like, what's he been
He
here?
finished 4th in
Top-
Boston last year.
And I was like, do you prepare the same for them? And he said, yes, actually. He's like, the courses are very different, but we don't change the training. Mentally, you just got to be ready for Boston. He's like, but the courses, some people say, oh, New York and Boston are both hilly. He's like, no, they're completely different. But I just found out something. Cyprian Kota, do you know who his brother is? This guy ran 2:04 last year.
He's training partners with Evans Chebet. I know that. I'm trying to remember. Wait,
Did the coach say anything about him?
I can look at my notes for what he told me about. I don't think anything sort of stood out as like he was blown away by his fitness or anything. But who's his brother?
Martin Well.
Wow.
So Martin Well,
He won London 3 times?
London 3 times, New York City Marathon twice.
And
And
this was-
the best marathoner in the world.
Yeah, this was back when London, London still is a huge deal, but this is when London was like the unquestioned best marathon in the world, and he won it 3 times. So
Damn, I wish I'd known
If you-
that. Martin Well, only 45. He's probably younger than Kipchoge. He should come back out there.
If you're just joining us, well, by the way, I can't get our names to pop up on the screen. So, this is What's Run co-founder Robert Johnson, joined by my twin brother, much faster twin brother, former USA 4th placer Weldon Johnson, as well as Ace staff writer Jonathan Gold. They are in Boston at the Fairmont Copley Hotel, where all the action is. The press conference has just ended. This is a live edition of the Friday 15. Normally our podcast just for our Supporters Club members. You can join today. Let'sRun.com/subscribe. All right, let's talk about a few other things. I didn't even mention this at the top of the show, but somebody wants to know, the Australian Olympic trials are going on. I call them the national championships. I actually looked at their website. It says Australian National Championships. It doesn't say Olympic trials. And I said, we shouldn't call it Olympic trials because winning this race doesn't guarantee you a spot in the trials. And then someone on the forum says, like, it's definitely the Olympic trial. So I don't know what it is. But the big one that we were into was the men's 1500 with 17-year-old Cam Myers, former Commonwealth Games champion Ollie Hoare, who hasn't raced in 10 months, Stewie McSwain, one of the top guys on the circuit, and others. I think on Tuesday I said I don't think Hoare's going to win, and he hasn't been racing, but he won his heat impressively. The final is what, tonight, John? Is that right?
yeah, 2:40 a.m. Eastern time if you want to stay up for it. Robert, I watched the heats it would have been Wednesday night, Thursday afternoon in Australia. I'm like, all right, maybe I'll learn something from this. I learned almost nothing because the Australian 1500 championships, they're just not nearly as deep as the Americans. Like Lyndon Hall and Jess Hull and then prelims, they just go right to the front. They ran like 4:13, 4:14 or something, and they were just gapping the entire field. Like it was so strung out, like the range of abilities there. So all 4 races, it was essentially, there was 2 prelims on the women's side, 3 on the men's side, and every one of them was just the pre-race favorite went to the front and led the whole thing. So McSwain did that, obviously, but then Cam Myers also did it in his heat and looked good. Ollie Hoare did it in his heat. And the one I was watching Horse Heat because Adam Spencer was also in there, who was my pre-race pick to win. And Spencer was not like right on him. He kind of let a little gap form in the home straight, but it was also top 3 made it, and he was so far in front of fourth. So I didn't really gain that much, but Ollie Hoare looked fine. But I also expect him to look fine if he's running 3:38. So I'm going to be very excited to see this final. Probably watch on delay at some point tomorrow, because you've got Cam Myers, you've got Adam Spencer, you've got Ollie Hoare, you've got Stuart McSwain. Only 3 of them can make the team, and only one can win, and that's really the guy who's going to be in good position to make this team. So it should be a great race.
But do we think anything's gonna? Is that our top 3? McSwain, Myers, Hoare.
Those are 4 guys I listed: McSwain,
fourth?
Hoare, Myers, and Adam Spencer.
I forgot about Spencer. Yeah. Oh, so yeah, I like the drama. I mean, sucks somebody needs to miss out. And I think the women's 800, there's already 4 women in Australia with the standard. So I was thinking, I didn't actually watch the race. When I heard Hoare controlled it from the front, I was like, oh, he probably wanted to get a good effort in because he hasn't raced. It's probably a good idea. But he's got a better kick. And my pick is, I can't see a 7. It makes no sense, though. A 17-year-old can't win. McSwain doesn't have a great kick, so he's not going to win. And Hoare's not going to win because it's his first race of the year. So that by default, Adam Spencer is your champion.
Well, that's the logic I arrived at, but I'm like, my only reason for not picking Cam Myers is because he's 17. If you just looked at his results and the way he's looked and the way he's been racing, and also he did pretty well with the long season last year as well. Like, he hasn't had a bad race. He did lose to McSwain earlier, but he's looked great all season. Like, if I didn't know he was 17, I would probably be picking him. And maybe I should, like Niels Laros and Jakob Ingebrigtsen, if he's that level of talent. Those guys could win a race like this at age 17. So, but it's scary going out on a limb. So that's kind of why I went with Spencer. But it wouldn't shock me at all if Cam Myers wins this.
But Hoare's pretty damn good, man.
Hoare's good, but
It'll
I don't know
fun.
if this was the Ollie Hoare of 2022. He wins this going away, I think. But it's the Ollie Hoare of April 2024. He's not back to full fitness. That's more of a question mark.
All right. And then there was some depressing news yesterday. Simeon Birnbaum, who was the top distance recruit in the country last year out of the high school ranks in America, went to Oregon. With the man had been struggling since Jerry Schumacher got there. And, he didn't race cross country, didn't race indoors, ran 1 race outdoors. Now it comes out he has a stress fracture, femoral stress fracture. So I actually enjoyed reading his comments that he put up on Strava. He was like saying,
he said it was Olympic team or bust, Robert. He thought he had a chance to make the team this year. I mean, I kind of admire the confidence, but I didn't think he had any chance to make the team.
Yeah, I'm grateful we caught it before it got worse, but I will not be able to race this other season. The timing is real terrible with the Olympics being this year. And I was like, why is he talking about the Olympics? And before the season started, I came in with the mindset of making the team or bust. I've definitely learned a lot about stuff I wish I didn't have to, but now I can hopefully make changes for the better. Hopefully my freshman transition period is over because I'm very excited to get for next year. So I just, that mindset was like bizarre, wild to me. And it kind of reminds me, to be honest, which is both good and bad. Like, I love it as a fan. Oh, he's going to win. He's just super ambitious. But it also reminds me a little bit of Alan Webb. And I think patience can be a virtue in running at times. So, Alan Webb, I remember hanging out when my friend Chris Lear was writing the book, Sub 4, was sort of embedded with Webb in his freshman year. And Nate Brandon was there, and they're like, man, Webb wasn't dominating NCAA. I think he was like 3rd or 4th or something. And he'd run a 3:53 mile in high school back when nobody broke 4. People were expecting him to crush every race. And like, Webb's upset. He thinks he should run 3:47 in the mile this year. I was like, what? Like, but he improved like 6 seconds the year before. So in his mind, he would do it again. Now, Webb eventually did run 3:46 in the mile. So that sort of crazy mindset did take him places. But I think sometimes in the short term, it can hurt you. So I don't know if he boosted it up too much or not, but I hope that it sound based on that was written. I was like, hopefully he doesn't just bolt and leave and go to another school, and he understands that there is a transition process, and hopefully, he'll be better off for it, in the long term. Because I used to say, when I was really cautious with people at Cornell when I was coaching, and it was babying the freshmen, whenever they ran like the year before, I try to go up a very modest amount of mileage. But if they did get hurt, which didn't happen that often, I would say, hey, I do think an injury early in your career can be helpful, because when you're in high school, you just assume everything, I can run more and more and do more and more and run faster every year. And you just take it for granted. And an injury teaches you, like, okay, the number one goal for the season has to be to stay healthy. If you're not healthy, nothing else can be accomplished. So I do think it can be educational, from that standpoint. But
Robert, are we going to talk about Flow Track getting the Diamond League rights at all, or do we just save that for the Tuesday podcast? Because it's a bit of a longer discussion.
I think we should save it for, the Tuesday podcast. I just think I don't know. Like, then the meets weren't on TV 15 years ago. I just think it's a mistake for the sport. The average person may not be watching the average Diamond League at work in the middle of the day in the US, but I do think that the pre-classic, which will still be on NBC, but the Diamond League final needs to be on some sort of legitimate sports network that casual sports fans might see, just because they're used to turning on the TV and ESPN is on, or something else. You're not going to pick up casual fans by putting everything under the paywall. I would like to talk about O.J. Simpson. He is now dead. John, were you alive when O.J. Simpson got in that Ford Bronco? Do you remember it? Tell us what it was like.
I was, but I was living in England and I was 4 years old. So I have no memory of the entire saga. And then I came up, essentially everything I learned about O.J. Simpson came from exposure to American pop culture. Like, I moved over here and I basically, they would make references sometimes to it in The Simpsons or stuff like that, but I wouldn't totally know it. And then I remember I would watch some of those game shows. I moved here in December 2001, and I would watch game shows, and Kato Kalin would pop up as a celebrity on some of these things. I'm like, what's this guy famous for? And then I find out, I'm like, wait, he was OJ's house guest. So I have gradually come to learn everything. And if you haven't seen the documentary, well, the way I learned all the details though was the FX did a show, The People versus O.J. Simpson, back in 2015, 2016. And that's when I learned all of the wild backstory. But I did gradually come to learn about the car chase and all this stuff. It was wild. Yeah.
There were two documentaries, and also ESPN. I never saw
Well,
either
no,
one.
the
Which was
FX one,
better?
the FX one was not a documentary. It was a scripted TV show, which pretty. It was sensationalized a little bit, but it was also pretty true to the source material. That was a lot of fun. The documentary OJ Made in America won an Oscar. It's an amazing piece of journalism. But the People versus O.J. Simpson is more fun, I would say. It's not that the whole situation, it's a sad situation, obviously, but in terms of pop culture and it's an entertaining television show, I'd say. Whereas O.J. Made in America tells the definitive story and puts it all in context. It's an amazing piece of work.
And apparently Jeffrey Trubin's book is a very good piece if you prefer that. But
that was the source material for the TV show. It was based on that book.
Right. So what I was saying was, or what I was going to say was, it's interesting. You're 33, right, John? So basically, unless you're 40, if you're over 40, this event was a massive thing during your life. And if you're someone like us, I remember where I was, and I was hearing, I was listening to another podcast. Clay Travis was saying, he's like, look, he's roughly our age. He's like, there's 5 things I remember from my childhood vividly where I was when they happened. And this OJ counts for 2 of them. Both where he was when he got in the Bronco and was on the chase. And I remember where I was. Weldon, do you remember where you were?
Yeah, I was doing a track workout at St. Mark's, my high school.
We were doing a
100%.
track workout at our high school.
Wait,
We're driving up.
It was happening while you were doing
Yes.
the workout?
We heard it
yeah.
on the radio or what? Somehow, there was you couldn't stream it on your phone.
Yeah.
We continue the workout?
No, so we heard about it beforehand. We wanted to do a track workout, but it was going on for so long, we didn't know what to do. So eventually we pulled our car up next to the track, rolled down the windows and blasted the radio as loud as we could so we could hear, if anything happened. But the workout finished and we went home, I'm pretty sure, before it finished, because it went on for hours. And then for the verdict.
About this, Robert, the car chase was going on during the NBA finals. And could you imagine, like, it was so crazy, and there was so much interest. I think it was like 93 million people watching this, which is like basically Super Bowl level numbers. They cut into the NBA Finals and made that, like, they did a split screen. And that was like the small screen. The main focus was on the OJ car chase, and they had the NBA Finals in a small screen because this is how insane the whole situation was.
And then, correct. And back then there was no internet, so like all the TVs, whatever was big back then, it kind of reminds me of Taylor Swift or Caitlin Clark. Like something that became big, it was always super big because all the networks would just focus on that. But when the verdict came out, I was so into the trial and thought he was guilty. But it's interesting now because if I knew the cops planted evidence, now I'm like, okay, if you planted evidence, it's not guilty. I was really mad and wanted him to get convicted, and he didn't. But I skipped class and I had a screw the juice party, and it was we had OJ, that's his name, orange juice and vodka, and I've just confirmed. I was like, yeah, my buddy Scott, 339, 15 meter guy, I'm like, he was a nerd and went to class. He said, yeah, there's no chance I'd miss that. But his girlfriend stayed. It was just me and her, maybe Chris Greer, author of Running the Buffalo. So Chris is not confirmed if he was there, it was not guilty. And, the reaction was certainly drastically different for the most part, depending on racial lines. Like African-Americans were really happy that he got off. Most white people were not. But there's an amazing clip. Check it out on Twitter. Oprah Winfrey's but everyone watched this live. Like Oprah Winfrey's studio audience watched it live. Oprah looked upset, but all the blacks in the audience were going, woo! And all the whites were upset. But I have an amazing stat on this. AT&T experienced one of the strangest moments in its history. Around 12:50, the long-distance calls began to taper off, registering a 19% drop below the levels. At 1 p.m., calls were down 49%. Then between 1:05 and 1:10, which is when the verdict actually came out, they dropped 58%. So everybody just ran to a TV. And Clay Travis was saying, he was in high school at the time. He's like, they wheeled in televisions to his high school classroom so everybody could watch the verdict. Like, we're going to watch it. So it was just wild. But
I mean, there's all this stuff I didn't remember. Like, did they not have bail then, or was he not eligible for bail? He was in jail the whole time.
Well, they denied bail because he wouldn't turn himself in. There was a whole car chase about it. So
thank you, John.
Yeah.
And the trial went for 9 months? How can a trial go 9 months? Like, what are you talking about every day? I mean, its defense lawyers did an amazing job, and the cops didn't dot their I's and cross their T's. And, you can easily argue that's reasonable doubt. Although I think all the jurors think he murdered her.
Well, there's another clip. I found it. The woman said, there's a juror. I sit out on Twitter clip. You can find it. Juror openly said, she said, look, this is payback for Rodney King. Like she said, flat out. So
right. The trial became a referendum on race in America. And the ironic part of this whole thing was OJ had essentially
transcended race.
It wasn't that he was transcended race. He was living in a rich white guy circles, essentially, And
what's interesting to me is this, to me, should have been the ultimate example of America has come so far. Like, color is not the most important thing. And, to me, it was his wealth and privilege, and he could hire all these lawyers, and he got off with murder. He killed 2 people and got away with it. And to me, it should have been like, okay, this is a great sign for America in some ways, because white people got a lot of breaks in the past. Now a black man can get the same break. So I can see why they would celebrate that fact. But reality to me, it's actually sad, because this is the beginning to me of what we see now and stop in society, which is it doesn't matter what you do. It just matters where you are in the woke pyramid. So whoever is the biggest victim on the woke pyramid can be sympathized with. And if you're beneath them on that, if you're above them on that, then you have no sympathy. So if you murder someone, it's fine as long as you're a victim, and it's disgusting to me. But it should have been the opposite. Like OJ can get away with murder, Barack Obama can be president, and instead it's like, no, it's just a terrible, terrible country. Right? Enough politics. I don't want to upset everybody. But
I mean, John said it in some ways, like OJ in some ways kind of transcended race, or John saying he was in a white, rich community. But I mean, it's sort of fascinating. I didn't realize this. He was the first black prominent black person to be in a nationwide advertising campaign or maybe TV with Hertz. Like he was so popular. Like I'm not old enough to remember him competing as an athlete, but like OJ the person was just like exciting. Like he was just like the personality. And I forever remember I was watching headline news. That was the thing. There was no internet then, and it came on there that Nicole Brown Simpson had been murdered. And then they said that. Then they said OJ Simpson. They just kind of threw it aside. If actual was arrested for not for murder, but they just sort of mentioned like he'd been arrested on domestic abuse charges. And I swear to you, I was like, I don't know how old, and I yelled at the TV, that's ridiculous. They're saying he's a murderer. Like I was a fan of OJ, and then obviously I didn't change my message, and I think he murdered them. But like it was sort of
Well, then I was interning at a sports station. We were in college that summer, and they came across the ticker, and they did the exact same thing. They mentioned that she died. He was such a big celebrity. I mean, I guess like Reggie, like who's the best?
I'm saying, who's the one-day equivalent of like the space OJ? Is it like Peyton Manning? Like, who would be the equivalent of like if they were arrested for murder now? Because I feel like Peyton was a Hall of Fame player like OJ, and now is sort of fairly present in media, outside of the sport. Like I'm trying to think, he wasn't. I don't think even he was as popular as OJ after his career. Like I'm trying to think who it would be.
It'd be amazing, but you don't have the racial angle of Peyton Manning. But it would be someone like that who's very wildly popular and whatever. But I was interning at the sports station.
Maybe like I don't know.
Yeah, and they referenced the wife dying, and then they said OJ was domestic violence. I said to the sport director, I'm like, why are we even covering this story? You don't know that he had anything to do with it. And he's like, you don't know that he didn't. And this is before there was any. And then all of a sudden, like 2 days later, it's like he's fucking arrested. I don't know how much longer it was. So wild story. Does anyone know, like, does he have a relationship with his kids? Like, what do they think about it?
I think they were there at his death. So people can do, and I heard some guy on the radio saying yesterday, like people can do crazy stuff with their minds. Like OJ in his mind might have convinced himself he didn't kill them. And it's, you sort of to deal with trauma, people do crazy things with their mind. So there could be a way he did this himself or his kids. I mean, who knows?
All right. Well, that's going to wrap our Friday Boston Marathon special show. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
Are we going to people want to know if there's a meetup in Boston? I'm debating, should I come on Monday? Do you guys think you can handle it without me? If we do the meetup, we could do it like after the race. I don't want to do a meetup before the race. We cannot have people drinking alcoholic beverages before the race. This is the opportunity of a lifetime to PR on Monday. So you need to be focused on your race, but I could do something like if I came on Monday, like 5 p.m., but it's expensive for him.
I don't know. Find John, people. John has the Let's Run credit card. I have to head back today. I'm coming back Monday. So I will not be here. There's no official Let's Run meetup, but John has free license to use the Let's Run card. Right. Supporters Club members. If you're a Supporters Club member, we have a rule. You get one free drink?
Yeah.
So find John, all Supporters Club members, hit John up for your beers.
But you got to do the secret handshake.
Secret handshake. Check the IDs, obviously, not just for 21, though, for the Let's Run secret Supporters Club ID.
Yeah, if you don't have a Let'sRun.com Supporters Club tattoo, you do not get the free. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. If you see me, I'm thinking Monday. If Roger's here, Monday night will be good. But who knows? Maybe you never know where the night takes you. Boston Marathon weekend.
Lisa Bay both in town. Rojo will be here now, apparently. Those of you who want to check out the comments at the 1:18:05 mark, that's probably.
By the way, anyone who's not a Supporters Club member, if you do get a tattoo of Let's Run, permanent tattoo on your body, lifetime free membership. All
right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll be back next week to discuss Boston Marathon, talk about the Diamond League deal. There's probably going to be we'll break down Australian Olympic trials, maybe some other crazy running news will break. Like, this has been a wild week. I can't believe the eclipse was Monday. Like, that seems like it was 3 years ago because all this other stuff has happened in the running world since that. So,
and if you haven't read our article on the under 20 championships, you got to go to the webpage site every day. Until tomorrow. Bye-bye.